Keeper League. This is your commissioner, Joe Pizarro, coming to you with the mid-season recap. Now, we have had such a fantastic season so far. A lot of ups, a lot of downs, some surprises, some things we expected. But we're at the midway point of the season. What we're going to do today is dive into where we're at as a league, some of the things that are going on and things to kind of look forward to, kind of going forward for the rest of the year. So, a couple things we'll talk about. First, we'll talk about the state of the league, where we're at today. Trade activity. I think over the last couple of weeks we've had a lot of big movers. Is the next flurry of moves going to be made? What are we going to look for? And a little bit of an impact for this year and next. And then just the outlook, for everyone in general, looking forward towards the playoffs. Hopefully avoiding the toilet bowl for most. But let's kind of continue and talk about the state of the league. We're in another exciting year, a highly competitive, highly energetic season as per usual. I think it's a standard that we've all set. It's a compliment, and I commend all of you, for taking each and every part of what each one of you do to make this league as great as it is. But I want to give a shout out to Jimmy. He took it upon himself to call himself the recap czar. He's been, this wasn't, kind of asked of him. He kind of saw an opportunity. He seized it. He's owning it. And I think the league's better for it. This isn't a dictatorship. This is a democracy. And as a commissioner, I love to see people taking initiative, being the change that they want to see in the league, and setting by example and action. Things that we all, can lean on Jimmy for not only his Thursday snaps, his Friday fuck yous or fuck you Fridays, and everything else in between. Jimmy, fantastic addition to the league, and would love to continue to see what you're going to keep bringing to the league, with all the energy and, positivity and everything, kind of that Jimmy football is all about. So let's kind of talk about some surprises. I think, on draft day, there was a few people. I think if we were to kind of take a straw poll, I would say Travis definitely had a team that was going to be tough to beat going into it. Varun had a very strong team. Baden on paper was looking to kind of get back into the playoff picture after making the finals. Ogle still flush with good keepers and good draft position. But and Jimmy, I got to call him out too. High draft pick, good keepers, drafted well. But the biggest surprise, is probably looking at good old Brennan at the top of the leaderboard. Right now, I know we're in week 9 matchups. We're not going to talk about what's happening currently. That's for someone else to cover, shortly after tonight. But Brandon's sitting at 8-0. He's definitely, probably by his own admission, a little surprised. We were all surprised. We probably continue to be surprised. But he's definitely a team that just keeps putting up points, keeps finding ways to win. And that's definitely probably one of the biggest surprises I think we've all seen. Injuries, I think there's a lot of teams up and down have been hit with injuries in some capacity. It's always part of the game. I think we got hit early with a lot of stars, which put a lot of teams under stress early. An example would be Matt Badens, who on paper going into the year probably had a great team, felt really good about it, felt like he could compete. But the injury bug hit hard, and it didn't hit just once, it hit twice, 3 times over. Just not fun to see when things are kind of taken out of your hands, but it also is, what are you going to do as an owner, to compete each week, find ways to win, or find ways to stay in it. All things you can't just wait for that guy to come back. If you kind of sit and wait, and you're probably going to pick up some losses along the way. Not to say they could have done anything earlier. That's not only just him. I know I've got hit with some injuries. We can probably all talk about all the injuries, I'm sure, and we don't need to hear Brandon talk about his injuries anymore either. But wins are really what matters. Regardless of how you get them, regardless of what the point differential is, wins are the most important thing to do and get in this league. You can have a great team at the end of the year, but if you don't have the wins to make the playoffs, it really doesn't matter. Wins are all that matters, and that's ultimately you are what your record says you are, plain and simple. So with the segue into that, let's kind of take a look at where we stand right now, with these week 9 matchups underway. Brandon at the top, like I mentioned, kind of doing his part, scoring points. He's probably been fortunate with some of those wins, not all, probably one or two, I would say, that faced an opponent that was underperformed but still pulled out a win. That's kind of the way things kind of come down to it. So his points against are definitely favorable on his side, but he's doing what he's supposed to do in scoring points. And I look down the next few teams. Jimmy leading the charge, Varun leading the charge in points. Tom having a very Tom-esque season. Probably not the most deep team out of the gate. Found some wins, found himself in contention, did not kind of settle. We'll talk about some of the moves later. Travis kind of in the playoff picture as per expected. Probably not the performance he would probably had at this point. Record-wise maybe, but points-wise, I know he's definitely probably not up to where he would expect to be. And Ogle kind of falling victim to the schedule at times, still putting up points. Same thing with Monaco. Over 900 points at this point of the season. Well over 100 each week. That's kind of where you want to be. To kind of consistently win in this league. We look down for the rest of them. A lot of middling teams. Mikey scoring okay, but definitely kind of getting hit with points against. Probably led to a lot of his decisions he's made. But we kind of have a clear gap, I would say. Probably those top six. Monaco creeping, and everyone else is kind of the way I see it looking at, through 8 weeks of the year. So, trade activity. If I did this when Jimmy asked me to, I probably wouldn't have had much to say other than a waiting game around week 7. There hasn't been much trades of significance through 2 months of the year, but usually around this point of the year, teams decide, are they in it, are they out? You definitely want to be first to market in some capacity while you have the buyers fresh. And Jimmy Football was definitely one of those big buyers, making the first big deal to acquire Kareem Hunt for a second-round pick. Following that up, getting rid of a third and a sixth. The third was Ogles, who he made in a different trade we'll talk about down later, to get George Kittle and Nick Chubb. So, Kareem Hunt, definitely a regular season running back with the impending Pacheco coming back at some point. That may not come back, so hopefully Kareem Hunt can produce for him in the playoffs. I think he covered himself not only with his very stout running back room, but adding another one in Nick Chubb just to kind of cover himself. Should Kareem fall out, should he get hit with another injury, he's definitely kind of solidified that position for himself. And tight end, I mean, we all know he loves Cole Kmet. He's kind of a team leader, may not necessarily be a team contributor week in and week out. But George Kittle is definitely, in a class above that. So getting him is very big for Jimmy, kind of moving forward. Now, when we look at Brandon, Brandon is another team at the top. On paper, you look at this roster and say, how is it 8-0? But his team shows up, scores points. He's been able to move guys in and out. He's kind of caught hot weeks here and there. Put together a very strong team by production. Not anything that we would have thought going into it. So you got to give credit where credit's due. He did trade one of his second-round picks for Amari Cooper right after he got traded to Buffalo. On paper, another sound move. Amari Cooper's hurt, as he tends to do. So we'll see if he can be a key contributor for Brandon. Brandon still has some bullets left if he needs to go out and get some more pieces. But definitely an added piece that he needed. He is been getting hit with the injury bug nonstop all year too. It hasn't stopped him yet. We will see if it will stop him later. But Varun made one of the bigger swings, high risk, high reward type move, trading his first, sixth, and Terry McLaurin for Tyreek Hill. Tyreek, when healthy, with a healthy quarterback, there is arguably no one better. He's a guy that can go off for 40 any given week. And you look at Varun's team up and down, you got CeeDee Lamb and Tyreek, you got Kyron Williams. It's a very strong team up and down. I think John covered it before. And this just adds another, kind of high octane player to the mix. The question will be, can Tua stay on the field? Because clearly when he was out, Tyreek was a shadow of himself and couldn't get the ball. So, it could work, it could backfire, but it's a big home run swing, a big bet on Tyreek Hill. And obviously, I'll be betting on Tyreek Hill all the time. Sad to see him go. But Tom, moving on to Tom. So again, thin team, looking for running backs ever since the draft, had solid keepers. And he kind of collectively traded a lot of his rookies that he drafted. He traded his first. He ended up getting Josh Jacobs, Rico Dowdle to kind of beef up that running back room that's ever developing with some of the other guys in his squad. adding Sam Darnold, another resurgence that only Travis saw coming. And Chris Olave, on paper, had a great first week. He also might have just been sent to the morgue, so we have to check on his health and heartbeat to see if he's still alive. But hopefully he can stay alive for Tom a little bit longer once games actually matter, to not have to give up that first-round pick and not have much to show for it. Chris Olave, obviously, still a keeper potential player, kind of moving forward. But, on paper, Tom solidified his team. He's already reaping some of the rewards of that, and went from a pretty thin team across the board with a lot of rookies and a lot of guys that needed to emerge to a much more veteran squad, someone he can rely on week in, week out. So, big moves as per usual by good old Thomas Evan Phone. Last but not least, Evan Ogle, the Ogle football team, Ogle Passion, made a trading his third-round pick to Jimmy, who donated $60 to the pot for receiving it, ultimately just trade that away. Thank you, Jimmy. Picking up George Pickens. George Pickens is someone who can add to Ogle's team. Ogle's been scoring points, definitely probably had a little bit more of a need to round out that group. So, kind of right around as the trade deadline creeps up, definitely a pick that is beneficial for Ogle, or a pick up for Ogle, not giving up too much for a player that's probably right around in that value. So great moves all around by the buyers. We moved to the sellers. Myself, talked about I'm on the other side of two of these trades. So, kind of saying goodbye to Tyreek Hill once again, not easy to do, but, my season has not gone anywhere near where I would have hoped. So, kind of capitalizing on a win now team to get a package that was, I thought, pretty solid. First and a sixth and Terry McLaurin, still gives me a wide receiver. We'll see how that plays out. Could be a keeper, could be someone on the block come trade deadline if another team needs another receiver, come calling. But Kareem Hunt ended up getting a second-round pick from Jimmy. Win-win across the board. Kareem Hunt I see as a guy that's very valuable this year. May not necessarily have a home next year. Could not. But kind of the acquisition cost was pretty low for me to get him, and taking a second now is something I was happy with. So we will see. Onward and upward to next year is really kind of where I'm going towards. Matt Baden, and we talked about him a little bit, kind of selling in an opportune time, selling Olave and Rico Dowdle for a first, and Blake Corum got a lottery ticket for another rookie, selling Chris Olave right before his funeral. So really kind of couldn't have played that better, from a selling point of view. So, again, kudos to Matt Baden, more from just a kind of result of circumstance under Chris Olave's murder. But we'll see. He's, again, set up. First round picks are very valuable in this league. So we'll see. I'm sure Baden will be back. His keepers are still pretty strong. So, and his team honestly can put up points. So I think he'll be somebody to kind of watch in the consolation bracket, unless he goes on a historic run from here on out to snag that last spot in the playoff rotation, as we like to say. And the last but not least is Brett. Mr. Tank 4.0. Sorry, I skipped Mikey. My apologies. Mikey sold Amari Cooper for a second to Brandon. Very good trade, in my opinion, for Mikey. Selling George Kittle and Nick Chubb. Collectively getting a second, third, and sixth for those three players, I think, is very strong. For Mikey as he looks to rebuild. Typically, of what Mikey does, goes for it 1 year, sells the next, tanks, goes for it the next year, tries to win, sells. We're seeing a pattern, and it's kind of falling right in line with the every other year. So Mikey's on an off year, he's on a sell year, so I'm sure he'll be back with a vengeance, capitalizing on these picks come draft day or pre-draft with trades next year. Mikey still has some bullets to trade. He has that kind of package of the impending CMC if he ever is going to step on the football field again. But him and Jordan Mason, definitely a package to watch if that's going to move before the deadline. And then Brett, I jumped the gun a little bit, but Brett, Mr. Tank 4.0, are we going to see a Tank 5.0? We have become accustomed. Brett's had a really good run in this league over the last few years. His last tank job really kind of set himself up for a pretty long run in competition. But he's kind of sitting towards the bottom. Things not going his way. Guys getting hurt. So he has some chips that he's got to make a decision on. If he could keep them all, he could sell some. He could kind of just go into next year and see if he could just draft a little bit stronger of a team. A lot of young guys as per usual, but Brett is definitely a team to watch on the sellers market to see if we will see another Tank 5.0. The outlook as we kind of move forward. I look at Brandon, Jimmy, Varun, Tom towards the top. Not far behind Travis. Travis is right there in record, but I see those four teams right now playing the best, scoring the most, deeper teams in general. We talked about Brandon. I don't know how deep his team is, but he has players that are scoring points, so that's all we'll say. But Ogle and Travis right behind. I think Ogle is more on the upswing. Travis is kind of hanging on. Is there a move that he can make? Made a little small trade for insurance for Ty Chandler. We haven't seen a big swing from Travis. We will see if he's a little gun shy or if he's going to go for it. Excellent GM, terrible decision maker is what he'd like to call himself upon entering the league. We will see, kind of what those two minds will do, come trade deadline to see if he solidifies anything, adds another piece, or kind of stands pat. Standing pat, I think he's a playoff team regardless. Ogle, still has a few, kind of tricks up his sleeve, I'm sure, but his team looks pretty strong on paper now with the pieces he was able to add. So I kind of see those guys as the favorites for the top 6 seeds in some particular order. Putting Brandon, Jimmy, Varun, and Tom in contention for that number 1 spot for the bye, obviously important. But the battle for 7th, we got Monaco, Buzz, Zeev. Technically, myself, a lot of these teams are 3-5, 2-6. I think Mikey's 1-7, but all within striking distance. There's still time. Wins are all that matters. Doesn't matter how you get them. Some collection of this group of middling teams, minus Monaco. Monaco's a little bit better than his record says, personally, I think. But, week in, week out, never know. But I see this whole group pretty much similar in some capacity, either battling for 7th, but really fighting to stay away from the bottom. 14th seed, automatic consolation, automatic toilet bowl entrant. So very important to kind of stay away from that. We will watch. Honestly, I think the consolation bracket and that fighting, it might actually be a little bit more entertaining than some of the top as they kind of duke it out. I think the league has kind of separated itself, at 8 weeks in. Which is normal. I think last year we had highly competitive up until towards the end. That still could be for this 7th spot. All depends on what teams are going to be doing. Are we going to go for it this year, get that last playoff spot, or not? We'll see. So moving on, what to watch for? We look at the trade deadline. It is coming up. I'm expecting a secondary trade flurry. I know we had a lot of deals done on trade deadline day last year. I think there's still settlers that have assets to give away. I think there's still buyers that are looking for those last finishing pieces. We have a couple big players still haven't made their big move yet, if they're going to make one. So it's kind of just a watch and see who will buy, who will sell, who's going to ride it out with what they got. It should be exciting. I know there's been definitely some chatter of some things out there, so we'll see if any of those things come to fruition. It's a fight for first round bye at the top teams, like we mentioned. Fight to stay out of the 14th round, 14th overall. Kind of automatic bid into the toilet bowl consolation. So I think there's a lot to watch for. A lot of excitement still to come. I think this season is off to a fantastic start. I'm expecting an even better finish. So with that, I want to thank all of you for listening. If you're still listening, thank you for every one of your contributions to this league. We all do our individual part in making this league of what it is. So as a commissioner, I thank all of you for that engagement, for that passion, Ogle passion. And I'm looking forward to the end of the year, see how this shakes out. As always, if you need me, call me. If you have an initiative, take action. But Godspeed, be well. Good luck to all the teams the rest of the year.